Today we will discuss how to read texts and answer the accompanying questions. I will show you my approach to a text. Before I actually do any reading of the text itself, I start by reading the title, looking at the writers, any pictures, source, and, if there are any, subheadings. This helps me establish the topic of the text and activates previous knowledge of the subject, which can help me in understanding the text better. Judging from the title, I think the text will deal with the attraction of the British seaside. The picture tells me that the dark sides of the seaside will also be discussed. I take this from the word dismal in the picture, which means dark and gloomy. Then I read the first question, which asks for information from the first paragraph. I highlight this part of the text just to keep my attention focused on the part of the text that is absolutely necessary for this question. After reading the question, I read the required bit of text.
At the entrance to Margate's newly reopened Dreamland theme park, there is a sculpture created from the salvaged scraps of former fairground rides. Entitled Be Entranced, it is a colourful mashup of coastal carnival motifs. At its heart is a red devil rising from flames, poised to make mischief. The image feels apt. The British seaside has cast a spell on pop culture over many generations, but it has never banished its demons. Despite a candy floss culture of sweet treats, bright sun, and giddy day trippers, it also has an edge. The promise of escape and excess. That edge is exactly why artists, writers, and filmmakers seem to find it so alluring.
Having read the bit of text, I think that B is the correct answer. I think A is incorrect, since no question is asked in this paragraph. C is incorrect, as the focus isn't on historical attractions. I also think D is incorrect, since it hasn't become popular recently, but has been for generations. I can support my choice for answer B with a bit from the text. The British seaside has cast a spell on pop culture over many generations, but it has never banished its demons. Note the signalling word but, which signals a contradiction. Keep in mind that answers are often found near signalling words and colons. This sentence shows the dual nature, the bright side in the first half and the dark side after the but. This is then explained once again in the sentence that follows. Despite a candy floss culture of sweet treats, bright sun and giddy day trippers, it also has an edge, the promise of escape and excess. This sentence also shows the dual nature, the one side in the first half and the other side after the colon. Again, note the signalling word despite indicating a contradiction, and note the colon, the place where answers are most likely to be found. I then continue reading the following question. I highlight paragraph 2 since I need that paragraph for this question. After that, I read the required bit of text.
That has been due in part to a stumbling economy. Once booming coastal resorts fell into decline around the 1960s and 1970s, suffering from the closure of railway lines and from a new wave of affordable flights abroad. More recent recessions hit seaside towns, including Margate, Blackpool, and Hastings, particularly hard, with the Office of National Statistics reporting increasing deprivation in the poorest spots. At the same time, seaside towns have seen the arrival of high-end art venues, such as Margate's Turner Contemporary and Hastings' Jerwood Gallery, as well as the multi-million-pound revival of Dreamland, which originally dated from 1920, but had closed in 2003.
Now I know what is said in paragraph 2, I believe that the correct answer is A. I think B is incorrect since I can't find anything about attracting talented people in the text. There is something about high-end art venues, but it says nothing about artists themselves. I think C is incorrect since I can't find anything about being overlooked in the paragraph. For D, I can't find anything about foreign investors in the text. I believe I can support my choice for answer A with a bit from the text. That has been due in part to a stumbling economy. Especially the words stumbling economy point towards the answer. It shows that there have been ups and downs, and the rest of the paragraph shows an example of recession and how they got out of that. For question 22, I need to fill the gap in paragraph 3. I highlight the text and then I read the text, generally up to the gap I need to fill plus one additional sentence. Often this is enough, but sometimes I need to read a little bit more.
The seaside's portrayal in popular culture traditionally has been dark and heady, not least in Graham Greene's 1938 novel Brighton Rock, featuring cold-blooded young killer Pinky. The introduction to the 1947 film version seems anxious not to brighten a large, jolly, friendly seaside town in Sussex by displaying the disclaimer that rather it recalls another Brighton of dark alleyways and festering slums, the poison of crime and violence and gang warfare, now, happily, no more. Brighton would recur as a battleground in the 1979 film Quadrophenia, and Helen Zaravi's 1991 novel, the feminist revenge thriller Dirty Weekend.
Before filling the gap, I have a look at the tone of the options given. I notice that A is positive, B is neutral or positive, C is positive, and D is negative. This makes me believe that D is the correct answer. An answer with a negative tone is needed because of the word anxious. The two negatives, anxious and tainting a reputation, are needed to lead to the positive quote that follows. I move on to the next question, for which I have to read paragraph full. I highlight the text and then read the text.
The seaside encourages and capitalizes on transgression, says Brighton-based cultural commentator Andy Medhurst. Seaside culture is somewhere where the everyday rules of behavior are put on hold. Compared to the average working week, where most people have to do set things at set times for set rewards, the seaside is a zone where all bets are off. It gives us the opportunity to write our own rules. In some cases, that can mean the usual codes of decency cease to hold much sway. Seaside towns are literally and metaphorically on the edge. They give a very particular perspective. When you look back inland, nothing seems as settled as it once did, and those instabilities can be culturally productive.
Looking at the different answer options, I believe that D is the correct answer. The paragraph deals with culture, and I can't find anything about inhabitants in this paragraph. That means that A is incorrect. For B, I'm unable to find anything about poor working conditions in this part of the text. And finally, there is no mention of seasonal influx of tourists, which means that C is wrong. I can support my choice for answer D with a quote from the text. It gives us the opportunity to write our own rules. In some cases, that can mean the usual codes of decency cease to hold much sway. The respectability is seen in the word decency. The grittiness is then visible in the fact that decency stops to hold much sway, meaning that decency no longer has influence. Note the semicolon used, another signal of a possible answer nearby. I then move on to the next question, 24, for which I have to fill a gap again. I highlight the paragraph and then I read the text, generally up to the gap that I need to fill plus one additional sentence. Often this is enough, though sometimes I need to read a little bit more.
Seaside resorts have spawned multi-genre music scenes, though their once-packed piers and pavilions have lapsed into seasons of washed-up entertainers. But that trend may be shifting. Newer big-name programming is taking place at venues from Blackpool Tower Ballroom to Bexhill-on-Sea's Delaware Pavilion, as well as Dreamland. Morris's 1988 hit Every Day Is Like Sunday lingers as the ultimate catchy seaside lament about the coastal town they forgot to shut down.
When looking at the options I can choose from, I see that I need to show that I understand the structure of the text, as I have to fill the gap with a signaling word. In order to do this, I need to know the function of the words given. A signals an enumeration, B signals examples, C signals a comparison, and D signals a contradiction. Looking at the text, I see that a contradiction is needed, which makes me choose option D. I support this using the text. Newer big-name programming is taking place at venues from Blackpool Tower Ballroom to Bexhill-on-Sea's Delaware Pavilion, as well as Dreamland. And Morrissey's 1988 hit Every Day's Like Sunday lingers as the ultimate catching seaside lament about the coastal town they forgot to shut down. The word newer is the opposite of 1988, which is older. This means that a contradiction is made between the new programming, which is popular, but cannot be beaten by the old programming. The final question deals with information from paragraph 6. I highlight the bit of text before I read.
It's unsurprising that skepticism surrounds the gentrification of coastal resorts and the invasion of DFL, down from London, hipsters seeking cheap property. In towns like Margate, kitsch vintage boutiques spring up yards from run-down charity shops. But even against such forces, the British seaside exudes a defiant strength. The North Yorkshire resort of Whitby, a landing spot in Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula, has drawn international crowds for a biannual goth weekend since 1994. Street art legend Banksy's 2015 bemusement park Dismaland transformed a disused Lido in Weston-super-Mare into a dystopian satire of death, decay and violence for 5 weeks. The British seaside retains its weird and wonderful dark side and keeps it going because nobody could go any further.
I believe that C is the correct answer to this question. For A, I'm unable to find anything about a traditional holiday in this paragraph. The text doesn't say anything about modern hype, so B is incorrect too. Finally, D is incorrect because there isn't anything about the uniqueness of the inhabitants in this paragraph. There are several indicators in the text that lead to answer C. This starts with the sentence, "But even against such forces, the British seaside exudes a defiant strength." The signalling word "but" indicates a contradiction. In the sentence before that, the text deals with gentrification, a lighter side of the seaside. The murkier side is visible in the part that the seaside exudes a defiant strength against that. A further indicator can be found towards the end of paragraph 6, where it is stated that the British seaside retains its weird and wonderful dark side. It being typical can be found in the word retains, and the murkier tendencies in the dark side. Checking my answers, I find that I've answered all of them correctly. If I hadn't, my next step would be to circle all the correct answers and to find phrases in the text to support these answers, as doing this would help me further along in the development of my reading skills. Now you try.